Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Investing 365. I'm here with Nate Shields. And Nate is from the Midwest, right, Nate?
That's right. Born and raised in Wisconsin, was down in the Chicago area for 20 years and just moved back to Wisconsin. So we're happy to be back.
Cool. Got that nice cold Wisconsin weather, I'm sure, going on.
Yeah, I think we got 4 or 5 inches of snow yesterday on Halloween. So, it's fun.
Oh, man. I was just talking about that last night while we were trick-or-treating. It was like, I was cold, but I wasn't even wearing a jacket. And I was thinking, when we go to Idaho next year, everybody's just going to be bundled up. So it'll be fun for the kids because they could just all be snowmen or something.
Yeah, right.
Funny. Well, cool. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about your history and what you do for work, and then we'll move into how you got started in real estate.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, actually, I was thinking about this earlier. My story goes way back to when I was a kid. I was like 9 or 10 years old. I just found this picture um, maybe a year or two ago. My mom sent it to me, and it was a whiteboard. I had drawn this like goofy cartoon guy, and on the picture, it's kind of like a businessman. He had like a suit on and stuff like that. And he had a briefcase, and on the briefcase, it had the two words real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I didn't find that picture until a couple of years ago. So I didn't know. I wish I had found that picture like, when I was 20. So I would have known that that's what I was supposed to do. But I actually didn't get into real estate until about 6 years ago. I tried to get into real estate roughly 10 years ago when I talked to a broker because I wanted to leave my marketing job. I wasn't super happy there. Wanted to kind of segue into something different, something more entrepreneurial. And he kind of actually talked me out of it. He's like, "Oh, it's really hard to be a broker, and it's hard to do it part time." And so that was kind of discouraging. And sat on that for a couple of years, and that was during the recession. And so at my other job, like it just kept getting worse. The our hours got cut, our pay got cut, our benefits got cut, and I wanted a way out. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually, I saw a post on LinkedIn from someone, an alumni. We were part of an alumni group, and saw that someone was looking for part-time agents in the Chicago area. And I was like, I got to talk to that guy. So I talked to him, and within a few months, I was licensed. I started out part-time, and within 8 months, I was full-time realtor and just loved that transition into real estate. I kind of always had in the back of my mind, even before this, that I wanted to own rental properties. I just thought it'd be cool to have like 10 or 20 houses, and other people were paying the mortgage and I was going to get some cash flow. I kind of forgot about that a little bit. And a couple years into my real estate journey as an agent, a property manager friend of mine sent me a text message with a link to the Bigger Pockets podcast and said, "Hey, have you checked this out?" And I think I had signed up for a free profile, maybe when I first got into it, but I had never checked out the podcast. So I started listening to the podcast, and within a few months, I'd listened to all of them. I think
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I went from the most current one to the first one, and it just kind of floored me. I was like, "Oh wow, it lit that spark to reignite that passion for wanting to get into real estate investing." So listen to all those. And at the same time, I talked to my buddy just a couple months kind of after I'd started this process of educating myself, really, even though I was in real estate on the brokerage side. And he wanted to also get into specifically rental properties. So we started out, we formed an LLC, lined up some financing, and went after our first deal.
Okay, cool. So what year was it that you kind of transitioned from your marketing job into that you started part-time real estate agent?
Yeah, that was almost exactly 6 years ago. It was November 2013.
Okay.
And so by that following summer in 2014, I was full-time agent. But then it was a couple more years before we started doing the real estate investing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I have quite a few people that listen that, everybody always thinks, should I become an agent? Should I not become an agent? Tell me a little bit about how that was transitioning from a full-time, salaried or position working for another company into a real estate agent job. Like, did it take you a long time to get your first deal? And how did you get, transactions going? Did you have a big sphere of influence in this area?
No, I really didn't. We had actually moved to a newer area, and not being from Illinois, um, I didn't have a whole lot going on in that regards. But luckily at the time, my managing broker gave me some suggestions of how to start off spending some marketing dollars to get some leads. And at the time, it was actually really cheap to get leads on, say, like Zillow and Realtor.com. Now it's incredibly expensive in most markets, but it was kind of the low hanging fruit at the time. And so I did that, and that kind of got me started. It took me, I think, 4 or 5 months to get my first deal.
Hmm.
But then after that, it just kind of, I guess, I wouldn't say snowballed necessarily, because it was never like I was making tons of money on the real estate side, but it was enough to leave my job at the marketing firm.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I've had that problem before. Like when I first got my real estate license, I don't really sell real estate now, but I was always thinking because I didn't have a big sphere where I was, and I was like, man, how am I even going to get these leads? And it seems like it's expensive, but definitely being on a big team or in a market like Chicago, there's plenty of deals out there to be had if you're hustle a little bit. They always say like most real estate agents aren't that good, so you just got to be better than half of them, I guess.
Exactly, right?
So then fast forward about a year or so, right? And then you started into real estate investing. Tell me about what was your first deal that you ended up getting?
So me and my buddy lined up our financing, and we started looking for deals. At that time, there were still foreclosures on the MLS. And so we looked at some of those and found a deal where I was living. It was a foreclosure auction property. We actually, um, it was actually an online auction. And so we bid online. We didn't get it. And so they actually, but no one got it. So they said that actually it's going to go to our live auction. So I think it was a couple weeks out. We went to Chicago and kind of prepared for a live auction, which we were both super nervous about. We're like, okay, what we don't want to get caught up in the auction atmosphere and overpay for the property. So what's our, when we were driving in the car, they were like, what's our final number on this one?
Mm,
Kind of strategizing a little bit. And we get there, and it's not like a real big room. They were auctioning off some properties, but apparently everyone that was there did want the same house. And so we're like, great. So the bidding went back and forth, and we had our high number in mind and we stuck to it, but we actually did end up getting it. And I think the reason we got it was because I think the other people in the room were probably looking to flip it, whereas we were looking to rent it, and our number was probably slightly higher because of that.
mhm.
So yeah, so we got it, closed on it, and it was pretty much a full gut rehab.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, when you go to these auctions, did you come there with like a cashier's check, or like how did you know what to do when you got there? And was this in Chicago City, like proper Chicago itself?
Yeah, it was just outside of Chicago. I think it was close to O'Hare, and it was in a hotel or something like that. I honestly don't remember if we had to bring a cashier's check. I think we just brought our checkbook, because I think it was like a $3,000 deposit or something like that. And then within a week, you had to have funding for the rest, something like that. And so it was a pretty straightforward process, but nonetheless, we were pretty nervous about it.
Yeah.
Every auction site and every county has different rules too. So this was more like nationwide. They would do auctions,
Hmm.
and they would just come to different markets and do the live auction if it didn't sell online. So every every auction site has different rules. So you just have to be really careful uh, about knowing what those are and how. And sometimes they can bid against you. I don't know if like you knew that, or some some listeners out there, but sometimes the sites will act like auction.com. The site will actually automatically bid against
Oh,
people
really?
bidding online. Oh yeah, yeah. And it's like you would think that that's super shady, but that's just the way the industry works. So
Yeah.
I'd
Oh, man.
recommend a live auction opposed to something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, cool. So you go get this house, and I'm sure you guys didn't really know everything that there was to know. You kind of just were like, "Hey, man, I want this house. I think it'd be a good rental. Let's go there." And you kind of figure it out as you were going, right?
Yeah, it really was kind of trial by fire. I mean, luckily I had my buddy. If I would have tried to do this on my own, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Hmm.
Luckily, he did have a little bit of experience. And the only reason I really jumped in at this point was because I think I had done roughly 50 or 60 transactions just on the real estate sales side. Like, so I felt comfortable with the transaction process.
Hmm.
But then after that, I mean, I didn't know anything about a rehab. I didn't know anything about managing tenants or property or any of that stuff. So we were kind of thrown into it, but luckily we kind of helped each other out. And it didn't go perfectly well, of course, especially with the contractor. We got a referral from a friend, and we just kind of, even though we got a couple bids, we went with this referral. And I made the mistake of not vetting the referral. I just figured, oh, it's a referral from a really solid person.
Right.
I'll just take them at their word. And the contractor ended up just being a little shady, uh, super slow with the work. And obviously we went over budget and way over timeline. So that hurt us in a number of different areas. So it was still interesting though to see the process of the rehab and all that kind of stuff. But we learned a lot of lessons too.
That's cool. So how much did you end up getting the property for?
I believe it was $62,000,
Okay.
and then we put about 62,000 into it.
So did you paid cash for it up front
Yep.
when you
Yep.
bought it? And then did you finance your own rehab, or did you get a loan for that?
Yeah. So initially, when we secured our financing, we basically got a line of credit from a commercial lender. And so we had enough cash to do both the purchase and the rehab for this property.
Okay. So I'm trying to think if I was new and I wanted to go to an auction, um, how would h- how would I know that, okay, this is a good house to buy? Like, maybe you obviously knew the area because you worked in the area, so you were familiar with, I mean, the different neighborhoods and everything. So you found this house in a neighborhood that you were comfortable buying a rental in.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then you obviously knew the area. So did you as an agent know what the rents could be, or did you call some property managers to kind of figure that out, or how did you determine that?
Yeah. We determined the potential rents ahead of time, and it was pretty easy for our market. It was basically $1 a square foot, give or take 10 cents or so, depending on the level of rehab with the property. So we figured we could get $1 to $1.10 per square foot.
Okay. Okay. So did you go to this auction in mind of only this one property?
Yeah, this was the only one on our radar at that time. So if we didn't get it, we're just going to move on and try to find something else. The different thing about this uh, was that it actually was on the MLS, so I had access to the property. I was able to see it ahead of time,
Okay.
so we were able to actually take like a contractor through, and I was able to get through there a couple times. Sometimes if it's a county auction, that's not going to be the case because it's just going to be pretty much sight unseen, and you might get a better deal, but you have no idea what's going on in there. There might be 3 feet of water in the basement,
Right.
so you just never know with those.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question, is if you kind of at least drove by. But so in Chicago, because it was a city auction, is that what it was? Or
This was different. Yeah, it was the asset manager for it connected with this nationwide auctioneer, and
mm,
so they marketed it basically on the MLS. But it was different than like say a county auction where you're at the courthouse, bidding live, something like that. So it was a little bit more of a hybrid between like an auction.com where it's all online and something like a county auction.
okay, cool. So yeah, it's perfect. So you guys decided that you kind of want to get into rental property. You said, "Hey, here's this house." You said, "How are we going to find it?" You're looking on the MLS, and you look on this auction site and you say, "Oh, this would be a perfect house," because you know the area. You kind of know what the rents would be. You look up the house, you find out it's on the MLS, you get access to it, you're able to go over there. It goes through the online auction and you don't get it. So then you go to the live auction and your only focus is just this one house. And right.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so then you go and you end up getting the bid because you can bid a little bit higher because your plan is to rent it out. So just as long as it makes your monthly cash flow or your cash on cash return, you're fine with paying a little bit more, right?
Yeah, I think that was our advantage there, because I do think the other people in the room were flippers, and so they had a number that was slightly lower than ours, and I might be wrong about that, but that was the feeling I was kind of getting.
Yeah, no, I kind of think that's the case too, because like with the wholesaling that me and some buddies are doing up in Idaho, or that he's really doing right now, you know, it's good to be able to look at a property with multiple different avenues of having it out. You know what I mean? Like if you can get it for a great, super low price, well, you might be able to wholesale it because you're going to make a big split, or if you're going to end up renting it out, as long as your rental numbers are high, just like you're saying, well, then you can afford to pay a little bit more and gives you a better opportunity to get that house. So having multiple outcomes is always a good idea.
Right. And I think along that same line of thought is, if you're going to, like, say, flip a property, because I flip properties too. And so, but I don't do any of the work. And so I have to get such a good deal on a property because I'm paying higher to use a general contractor to do everything. And it's more turnkey, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can go in and you're more of a do-it-yourselfer, or it can at least do some of the work yourself, you can bid a little bit higher, get that property, and you make up that money, because you're doing some of the work yourself.
Right. Especially for people just getting started, right? It might be beneficial to do that because it's less risky. You get to learn ins and outs until you can actually like afford to take a little bit more risk and maybe like break even on a property or lose a little, hopefully not, but you could lose a little bit if you're, have a general and you have all this overhead and everything if you don't do your numbers right. So
Yep.
in time. Okay. So you guys got it all remodeled. You spent like 65 grand on the remodel. And then what did you do after that? Did you end up cash out refinancing or how did that work?
Yeah, in a sense, we were trying to do, kind of that Burr method. We did a cash out refinance once we got tenants in there. We had to leave a fair amount of money in there because that's what our lender wanted to. So I think we ended up leaving 30% in, which is okay. That's fine. That's fine with having more equity. So I think it appraised. So we were in for about 124, and it appraised for 150. And we got this pretty much brand new house, and we got tenants in there, roughly 1,500 a month, something like that. And yeah, so that was the first deal.
Sweet. So at 150, you probably got a loan for 120 grand. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was a little bit less because we had more equity in there. I think it was 105,000, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. But you still got to pull out, majority. I mean, you left in a little bit of money, but
Yeah, we left some in. Yep.
not too much. Okay, cool. So did you end up having a property manager for that property or you just did it yourself?
No, we actually still manage that property to this day, and which is not the case for most of our properties, but yeah, we still manage that, and we still have the same tenants in, actually.
Oh, perfect. That's cool.
Yeah.
So what was some of the was there any big mistakes that you guys made on that property that you in hindsight you're like, gosh, I wish I didn't do that?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically not vetting that contractor enough, maybe not getting enough bids on the property, um, just trusting this other, business referral for this contractor. And we're facing some of the repercussions to this day because we've had to have a few fixes over there, and mostly like plumbing. So they took some shortcuts on plumbing, and we're still fixing some of those things. So,
Oh,
the good thing about it though is that I knew that I had to find another contractor, and so after that, I just through networking, I did find a contractor that I could trust, and I'm actually still using them to this day.
okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I even find myself doing that sometimes. I'll get like a referral, and you end up calling, you talking to the whether it's a property manager or a contractor or something. If you build good rapport because you guys talk to each other well, and it seems like a nice person or whatever, then you're like, must be great, and you just kind of like end up trusting too much, instead of for me, I feel like I almost am gonna hurt somebody's feelings if I go and I ask other people and I have to come back and tell them no, sorry, I went with somebody else. You know what I mean? Because it's like you almost build a friendship. So that's
Right.
one thing I gotta me, and I'm sure a lot of other people gotta get over and just be like, hey man, business is business. The numbers got to work, and I don't think you're gonna do that good a job.
Yep, yep. The numbers have to work and the relationship has to work. So it's, it's not easy, but it can be done for sure.
Yeah, cool. So let's fast forward. Where are you at now? How many units you have? What type of investing are you guys into? And you can tell me a little bit about your company that you have started and got going on.
Yeah, so we've got 25 total units now in 3 different states. So that's comprised of 3 single families, a duplex, and a 20 unit building. And then on the side, like I said, I flip some houses too. So I flip about probably just 2 houses a year. And that's just kind of my own little thing.
Okay. And this is the houses that you flip or in around where you currently live?
Yeah, so we just moved back to Wisconsin. So all the houses I've flipped have been in Illinois.
Okay. All right, cool. And you have a partner in this. Is it the same partner that you originally started with?
So my original partner were 50/50 partners in the rental side of the business for our buy and hold stuff. And the flipping is just me.
Just you.
Yep, just me. I'll bring in private lenders and money partners, stuff like that per deal. But as far as the company itself, it's just me.
Okay, cool. Are you still an active real estate agent, or is this all you do full time? Is just the rentals and you're flipping?
Yeah, it's been interesting since almost exactly a year ago. I was doing a flip and I started a YouTube channel to kind of document the flip. And then it just kind of migrated into doing some broader real estate investment education stuff as well. And so I was still selling real estate over the past year, but now I've had so many people reach out for help, for coaching, stuff like that, that I've been moving full time into coaching and education, stuff like that. I'm still doing some flips. Obviously, I'll always do the buy and holds as well, but I'm not doing the agent thing anymore.
Right. Okay. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's kind of once I get more under my belt, and I think I get a little more um, notoriety going on. You know what I mean? That's kind of the avenue I'd like to go to as well, because I mean that's part of the reason I started this podcast. I mean,
Mhm.
I love talking to people and helping people out and meeting people that are actually gonna do something. Right? We've all met thousands of people that talk a big game and I'm gonna get into rental property. I'm gonna buy real estate, and 5 years later, you're like, hey man, how's it going? And oh, I'm still looking for that deal. It's like, okay, well, time to get on the ball. you know?
It doesn't take that long to find a deal if you focus.
Yeah, definitely focus on it. So, it seems like a ton of people these days, everybody's into smaller to mid-sized multifamily, that 5 to the 20 unit property. So, let's dig in on that a little bit. How long have you had the 20 unit complex?
It's been about a year and a half.
Okay.
And so it was really interesting how we found this one. My buddy was just looking on LoopNet, where most people think deals go to die, and I think that's the case for some of them. But he saw this apartment building that was out of state, and the numbers looked really bad. They looked terrible, and he was like, "Why is that? That just doesn't really make sense. Why would it even be
Yeah.
advertised that way?" So he dug a little deeper, and once we got the rent rolls and the tax returns, stuff like that, we're like, wait, this is a really good deal. It was just mismarketed.
Yeah.
So we were lucky in the sense that that was the case. And then once we got it under contract, I mean, I mean, it was such a good deal because not only was it mismarketed, but we got quite a bit off of the market price too. So it was just a fantastic deal all the way around.
Sweet. So, and you said it was out of state. Where was this one?
This one's in Alabama, just a little
Wh-
bit outside of Huntsville.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I've heard a lot of people talk about Huntsville, Alabama. Seems like Huntsville's a good market, right? They have like the space center there and they got all kinds of government facilities and
Yeah, there's a decent amount going on in Huntsville, and then we're a little bit outside of that, closer to the University of Northern Alabama. So there's a lot of good stuff going on there too.
okay. So how did you guys kind of land on that area? Because I mean, people get on LoopNet, right? And they zoom into different areas, but it's just like it's overwhelming, right? How do you pick a certain area and just like focus on it?
Right. Yeah. I think that area was a little secondary. I mean, the deal first was really good. So we locked it up, got it under contract, and then, and we knew basically what the apartment building condition was, the numbers, we knew all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
But we did go down there to check it out. And the main thing that we were concerned about was like, what is the area like? What are the demographics like? And are we going to retain the existing property manager, or do we have to find someone new? So those were the two big things that we were looking for. So when we got there, we were actually very pleasantly surprised by all the things going on in that area. There were just lots of good jobs, good shopping, just access to a lot of different things. So that was really great. And we met with the property manager over the course of a couple of days, and we decided we would retain him. If we followed through on the deal, he'd already been managing the property for about 10 years. So he knew every single tenant. He knew everything that had been done to the property,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So it ended up all coming together really nice.
How did you find, or how did you know to look in this area? Like, how did you land on Huntsville and surrounding areas? Did you just kind of look at
Yeah,
demographics, or?
that's a good question, because my buddy found it,
Uh-huh.
and just because it was on LoopNet, he was searching. Who knows what his criteria was exactly, but
Okay.
just because he found that, and then it actually happened to be in a decent area, we pursued it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of things that you can look at for different areas, right? Like job growth, if it's at or above national average, unemployment rate, at or below national average. You can look at like the age of the demographics of the people that live there, crime rate, all kinds of different things. There's lots of that good info on bigger pockets, especially to what to look at. And Huntsville meets a lot of those key metrics, it seems, and I'm sure surrounding areas is kind of the same way. So cool. So you found the property on LoopNet. You said it looked like good property. You guys start digging into it a little bit. The numbers look super weird. So did you just call the listing broker directly?
Yeah, we talked to the listing broker, got all that information, and then once we reviewed all the financials, we started negotiating, put in an offer. Once the offer was accepted, we flew down there and checked it out.
Okay, so this was only about a year and a half ago, right? You said.
Yep, yep.
So did you find, or excuse me, did you seem to notice that the listing broker, I mean, did he take you guys real serious at first? Is he a commercial broker?
So it was she was splitting her time between California and Alabama. I think she grew up in Alabama, but had a lot of connections there and owned property there herself. Um, and the gentleman that owned the building was also in California. It, and I don't know exactly what happened, but it just ended up being mismarketed. There were some unusual communications back and forth, but we're like, if the numbers make sense and the demographics make sense, and we think there's also some upside with this, we're just going to go for it.
Cool. All right. So yeah, sounds good. I mean, the reason why I asked that is because seems to me different markets that I've kind of started to look into. I contact commercial brokers in the area, and it seems like there's so many buyers out there and so much money that really they don't really even have time for another buyer. You know what I mean? Because they
Right.
have their
No, that's
list.
true.
They
That's
have their
true.
yeah. It's like they have their list of people, and it's going to get swooped up eventually by one of their people. Why are they going to waste their time talking to you? So
That's absolutely true. And I think the difference was in this deal, because it was mismarketed, it had languished on the market for a very long time. I don't remember how long it was, but it was like 8 or 10 months, maybe even a year. And so that's a really long time for a property that should have been sold right away just by word of mouth, by the broker reaching out to, another agent. And I think in this case too, it wasn't actually a commercial broker, even though she owned commercial property. I think she was more of a residential agent. So that may have been part of the problem.
okay, yeah, no, that makes sense too. Maybe that's a good tip for people to look at if you're looking on LoopNet and you see something that's been on for a really long time in our market today. Most things are moving quickly. It's like, well, maybe something wrong. Maybe that's a key to look into it more.
Yeah, when I'm looking for deals on LoopNet or the MLS, that's one of my criteria. I'm usually looking for something that has been on the market a long time, because yes, something's wrong, and either it's because the price is bad or the condition of the property is bad or it's mismarketed. Sometimes these properties, they might have one picture. And so if there's only one picture, like no one's going to get a real good idea of what the property looks like or the condition, that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff I look for personally if I'm looking for, especially a house to flip.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that's been on the market a while, one picture, it's probably a bad picture, or maybe there's a few pictures, but they're all bad. And yeah, stuff like that.
Cool. Okay, so you guys ended up, you called the broker, you got all the did you put a letter of intent in first, or you got the financials and everything first?
I think we had the financials, and then there was a letter of intent, and then the actual offer.
Okay, so once you got the financials, you ran all the numbers, um, you put the letter of intent in, they said, yeah, that sounds good. You put the offer in, then you ended up taking a trip down there?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Um, cool. So did you have when you get down there, you did your inspection, did you end up hiring an inspector or did you just go through it yourself?
Yeah, we did hire an inspector. We also hired an independent appraiser. So I mean, we spent quite a bit of money. I mean, when you're looking, let's say if you're just buying a single family house, you're spending like $400 or $500 on an inspection, and then if you have to pay for the appraisal, that's like another $400 or $500, something like that, depending on what part of the country you might be in or what kind of property it is. But when you start to get in these bigger commercial deals, that number goes up real
Yeah.
quick. So I don't remember what the or the inspection cost, but it had to be probably like 1,500 or 2,000 or maybe even more. And I think the appraisal was roughly the same, two to 3,000, something like that. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably like that. I had a small 14 unit deal that I, had an inspection done. I hadn't had the appraisal done yet, but the inspection alone was like $3,000. Plus I had plane tickets to go out there and
Right.
it ended up everything falling out. So I spent like $5,000 on this thing. And I mean, saving money in the long run, I'm sure, because I decided not to go forward, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not the same as spending $500 on a single family house and you're out.
Yep. It's just something to think about when you're looking at commercial properties for sure. And the
Hmm.
numbers are a little bit bigger all the way around though. So
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you have the inspector and the appraisal go through. Did you go through every single unit or did you kind of do a skipping, every other unit, or what'd you do?
I think the inspector went through every unit. When we went down to look at it, we didn't look at every unit. We probably should have. Um, I think if we did that again, we definitely would look at every unit. We looked at probably half of them, something
Uh-huh.
like that. But yeah, the inspector did get into every unit.
Yeah, I think that's key is, um, making sure you get into every unit because that one you miss is always going to be maybe, who knows, might be the one that's just absolutely horrible. It's got to,
Yeah, that's actually been the case because lately we've had a few vacancies and we've had some expensive turnover costs because people that have been there, say, 5-10 years and they didn't take care of the place. It's just, yeah, it gets expensive to turn those over.
yeah, I forget. I think it was Jeremy that I interviewed on a couple episodes ago. I don't think he told the story on the podcast, but he had a house that he was wholesaling and they didn't really look at it, but they ended up having a dead person. Somebody died in like a back house on the property. They never went in it, and then they found it later. Found the person like, after the transaction already got going and stuff. And it was just kind of a big ordeal. I forget exactly how it went, but it's like, could you imagine? You don't go in one apartment and then all of a sudden you close and somebody's been rotting in there for weeks. Who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah, got to do your due diligence.
Yeah. Okay, so you you move forward. You end up liking the property. How did you end up financing this?
So we got kind of an extension on our line of credit, and that kind of, so essentially we're in this property for 100% financing is
Oh,
basically a way to look at it. So our cash flow is not as great, but we're basically out of pocket, no money.
okay. So dig into that. Tell me how did that work?
So we had a line of credit with our lender and they were able to finance the property, no problem, but we didn't really have the funds for a down payment at the time. So they were able to give us an extension on our line of credit. And so obviously we're paying an interest rate on that too. So at this point, we're paying down that line of credit, essentially paying down our down payment. But at the time it was a way for us to lock up the deal and not have to worry about that.
So you had a line of credit with like a bank that was local to where you live that
Yes.
that you were doing other deals with, and that line of credit was big enough that you could just like essentially you paid cash for the property,
Yeah.
except it was through your line of credit. So, do you plan on refinancing that into like a longer term debt, like maybe a something?
Yeah, I mean, we do have debt on the property now, but it's probably something that after we fully um, kind of turn over the property, because one of the upsides of the property was just the rents were they were low across the board, so they were all below market. So that was another way for us to come in and add some value to it. So as we're doing that, once we complete that, which I would think would probably be in the next 6 months or so, then we'll probably either look at some sort of refinance or even potentially selling the property at that point.
Okay, so did it take renovating the units in order to up the rents, or were they just like they never been raised?
No, they just hadn't been raised in so long.
Okay.
So we were raising rents $50 to $75 per unit across the board, and they've been renting very quickly with no problem.
So how did the property manager had already been there for like 10 years? To me, that would kind of throw up a little bit of red flag and saying like, okay, well, your job is to take care of the property and maximize it. Was it the owner that just didn't want to raise rents, or the property manager just kind of laid
Yeah,
back?
he was saying that the owner was just too nice and that
Okay.
he didn't want to raise the rents, So I mean, it's a business, so you gotta be at those market rents
Yeah.
to make sense. So that's what we've been doing is as we get turnover, we just bring them up to market.
Okay. So you found that your property manager has been fine with doing it, and he's been doing a great job so far still.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. Can you explain, if for anybody that doesn't know, why is it important, even more important, to up your net income or your rental income on commercial property? It's important on residential, but it's not nearly as much, right?
Right. Yeah. So for your typical single family or 2 to 4 unit property, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever the comparable properties are selling for. It's not based on income. Whereas once you get to that 5+ unit range, you're in that commercial asset class and it's based on your net operating income. So if you can get that net operating income up and even get some help from, say, compressed cap rates, stuff like that, then you increase the value of your property that way. So I like that way better than trying to rely on an appraiser for a value of a property. It's there's more ways to do it, and it's more consistent, and you know that what the value of the property is going to be.
Right. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. So, um, was there any, well, first, let's say, did you have specific criteria for this deal for having being a multifamily, like um cash flow per unit or a percentage of return or something that you were kind of judging it against?
We didn't have anything like specific criteria, but when we saw how it was mismarketed, when we saw what the upside was, and we saw what we could get off of the market price,
Uh-huh.
like it was just a slam dunk deal. Like it was just like it wasn't like maybe some people might say $100 a door, which I think makes sense in a lot of markets for maybe a single family or a small multi, something like that. After all your expenses,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, we didn't have any specific criteria. We had to get this deal because it was so good.
Yeah. Okay. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what is like you guys' cash flow on 20 units a month? I know you have like no money into it, so it might
Right,
not be a
right.
lot, but
Yeah,
what do you
so
get in
it's
return?
yeah, so just to go over the basics of the deal, it's a 20 unit building. It's in a smaller town, and it's a C-class property. Um, they're all 2 bedroom, 1 bath apartments, and they're not, it's not like the nicest property in the world, but it's a decent place to live, and a lot of people have lived there a long time.
Uh-huh.
And some people are going to laugh at how low the rents were when we picked up, but they were in the 350 to 375 range per unit. And so we've been raising those up to about 450 across the board as we get turnover on those. So it was originally listed at 575. We got it under contract for 475, and it immediately appraised for 573. So
Huh.
basically at closing we made $98,000 on
Huh.
paper
Sweet.
on that. And the cash flow, yeah, it's cash flow is roughly 8 grand a month gross. And then you can just kind of work the numbers backwards from there.
Right, right. Cool. Yeah, no, that sounds good. And it's like, I think anywhere you go in the country now, doesn't matter if it's in Podunk, Arkansas, or Alabama, or anywhere, I feel like something in the threes for the most part, especially a 2 bedroom. I feel like if you see that, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be able to increase the rents a little bit. You know what I mean? Because that's just, I mean, markets have gone up everywhere, right? So,
Yeah, it's not going to get cheaper to rent property for sure. And especially, this is an asset class I like from the standpoint of there's a lack of affordable housing in America.
mhm.
And so everyone's going to be able, even if there's a major recession, everyone's going to be able to afford $450 a month. Like that's the nice thing. The downside could potentially be if you have vacancies and turnover, stuff like that, and it costs you say $1,000 to turn over a unit, that's, and your AC unit also goes out, stuff like that. Like that
Yeah.
can add up, and it's nicer maybe to be in like a B class property where you've got $1,000 to $1,200 a month rent instead. But each asset class has its pros and cons.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing I like about the C class property, because if we do go into recession, then um people that right now they're kind of, they might be living a little bit above their means and they're trying to get into the A class property. They're really nice, like downtown, whatever you'd call them, like downtown nice places. If the recession hits and they might, get a pay cut or something, well, those people are going to be moving down to the B class. The B class people are going to be moving down to the C class, and the C class people are going to try their hardest to stay there because nobody wants to go to the next level down, right? So it's
Right.
almost like a really good protected little niche there. You know what I mean?
It
So
is. It is. And I think too, in that space, let's say you're in the C class space, uh, with this size as well, say, let's just call it like a 10 to 40 unit type of building, that there is less competition for stuff like that because they are a little harder to manage. And, but there's not many people looking for that type of property. They're either going to look for, say, the max out at 4 units or maybe like 8 or 10, something smaller, or they're going for the big stuff and they're just going to syndicate, the 200 door apartment deal.
right. Yeah, no, definitely. Cool. So, um, was there any big downfalls or major things that happened during this transaction that you know for your next apartment that you'll hopefully look out for?
There hasn't been anything huge. I think we've definitely learned um, some of the things I mentioned. Like some of these tenants have been there a long time, and either they were hoarders or they just didn't take care of the unit. And so then when we do turn it over, it's great to get that extra rent going forward, but it's an expensive turnover. So that's a little unfortunate. And then with a 20 unit building, there's like 20 air conditioning units, and so we've had several of those goes out. And so if you have one or two of those go out in a month, it just decimates your cash flow, stuff like
Right.
that. Just stuff to think about when you're, I mean, I'd prefer to go into a property and renovate the entire thing to take care of all your capex, and that way you don't have to worry about stuff like that. But in this case, it was in decent condition and it just wasn't in need of much in regards to anything. So it's just, for us, it's just a wait and see kind of thing. And of course, these things will happen.
Right. Cool. Okay. Um, so where are you headed from here? Like, do you want to continue in this multifamily path and continue to get bigger properties, or move into syndication, or what's your plan?
Yeah, I think initially we were thinking of, you know, just pie in the sky when we were first brainstorming our goals. Like, oh, it'd be cool to have 100 units in 10 years. And I'm sure we could get there because we did all this in like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Um, but, as the economy changes and as we learn things too, we're eyeing some different asset classes. So we we're not exactly sure where we're going to go, but I think we're going to go either into the self storage space or into like a commercial asset, like say a triple net lease on like a Taco Bell or Dollar General or a space like that. So we're probably going to liquidate part of our portfolio here over the next year and move on into some different asset classes.
Okay. Well, and since you touched on the economy, I think I'm going to start asking people from here on, what is your thoughts on where the market is? Because some people say it's at the top, some people say it's still got legs to go, and I'd like to know what your thoughts on it is.
Well, there's certainly some troubling areas. You look at like consumer debt and student debt, and that's going to really start to hurt people. which is good for, say, affordable housing. But
Yeah.
those are a couple things that are going to pull on the economy. I'm sure there's a lot of other things too. You see in some of the more expensive, like the coastal markets or some of the big metro areas, especially in the higher price ranges, you're starting to see, and this has been happening even over the course of the last, say, 6 months, prices to pull back, days in the market to increase. So you look at those and usually everything else follows after that. But a lot of people still say that the fundamentals are there for some more runway with, just say, your run of the mill other properties. So there could still be, I mean, there's still low inventory,
Right.
and and prices are still going up in a lot of areas. So if the demographics are good, there still looks like there could be some potential to run up either equity off a flip or a rental, or yeah, a lot of different ways to look at that. But at the end of the day, we don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, there's probably millions of people that were saying in 2006, like early 2007, that, oh, everything looks great and it's going to keep going. And there's some people who said, no, it's going to crash. So we don't know. But to me, what I think is, uh, you know, with interest rates still being low, that's like really saving us from anything major happening. You know what I mean? But as soon as those interest rates start to tick up, I think that's where you're going to see a little bit of a downturn. But I don't think it's going to be huge because, especially in the multifamily space, because a lot of people that have bought over the last 5 years, um, if they have like commercial loans that are going to adjust after 3 or 5 years, well, their loans are adjusting right now, a lot of them, and oftentimes they're adjusting lower mortgage, lower percentage rates than they got them at. So now they're, in less danger of even um, going underwater on the property because their cash flow is higher, right? Because now they have a lower mortgage payment.
Yeah, now
So
they can hang on to them for another 3, 5, 7 years, and then they'll have so much equity in the property that they'll never be in trouble, really.
yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing. It's like on one hand, I get scared sometimes of putting offers in on these properties that I am, but on the other hand, it's like, well, what if it keeps going for 4 or 5 years? The cash flow that I'll lose out on and the equity that I'll build and stuff is gonna, you know, it's gonna dwarf the little bit of a 10% downturn that we might have. So
Yeah, and I think it depends on what you want to do too. I mean, if you're flipping houses, depending on where you're at, I'd probably be a little more cautious.
mm,
You just want to make sure that there's plenty of meat on the bone and that you have exit strategies in case something does go wrong. But if you're in rental property investing, then as long as you're cash flowing or at least cash flow neutral, and you're hoping that maybe you get some appreciation, I mean, it's like it's just not, it can't go that bad.
yeah, well, yeah, and I'll get off this in a second, but now that just makes me think too. Like let's say there is a big crisis with student loan, debt issue that's going on, or some other aspect in the finance world besides housing. Well, then people aren't going to be able to get loans, so they're not going to be buying houses. So there's going to be more people, like you kind of alluded to, looking for rentals, and which is not going to make the rental prices go down. It's going to make them go up. So your rental property they're buying now is probably going to be a safe bet no matter what.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that with the compressed cap rates, well, they can't compress any further. But if what you're talking about is true, they will compress further.
Yeah.
So a 4% deal today could be a 2% deal in the future. I mean, it's just crazy, like what could happen. But
Yeah.
again, we just don't know.
We just don't know. Yep. Cool. Well, let's move on to our next little section here. Is is there any favorite resources that you have for, whether it's for this new kind of area that you might go into for triple net leases, or um, storage units, or multifamily property, like resources you like to go to learn about a new thing? Like, is it podcasts, books, seminars? What do you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Bigger Pockets because that's where it all started for me. And there's just so many people doing so many different things on there, and it's just a great way to network as well. So, I mean, that's always a great place to start. I read a lot of books, so whatever I have an interest in, I just read a book on it, typically speaking.
Yeah.
Or nowadays, yeah, there's a podcast on everything, so you can go out and find those podcasts too. So I mean, Bigger Pockets is still probably what I consume, even at 25 units and doing flips and stuff like that, just because there's a lot of good content there, and there's a lot of things to learn still, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of people to connect with too.
Cool. Okay, what about a favorite app? Do you have a app that you use all the time that makes your life easier?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I mean, Dropbox for sure is one of my favorites. Just a way to keep everything organized in the cloud. That's a must. Another one, and I don't know if everyone will have access to something like this, but talk to your local title company, see if they have an app, because a lot of them do, and it's just super cool to be able to use that app for, I mean, a lot of different things, but I use it most often for closing costs, especially on flips and stuff like that. You can just plug in the numbers for that municipality or that city, whatever it is, and kind of work with the numbers that you got, and you'll spit out that number for the closing cost, which is just really nice to have, because otherwise it's a couple phone calls and you're kind of getting like a maybe number sometimes. So I like using that.
Okay, I never heard of that. So that's cool. That's a good thing that I'll look into as well. Okay, what about a mindset tip as far as if you get down in the dumps or you're not really like motivated to continue on, or you get some bad news at your thing? How do you kind of pull yourself out of that and get refocused?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few different ways to approach that. I mean, I think exercise is always a great way to get out of a funk. Just get that adrenaline going. And I
Yeah.
like, if something. I mean, I just like to go out for a run. I mean, that's just what I like to do. Is for other people might be something different, but that's one thing. And I think just the mindset is, this is a long term game. No matter what you're doing in real estate. So you just got to have expectations that bad stuff's going to happen and things are not always going to go your way. You got to stay in the game, and don't let a bad deal or a bad day take you out of it. Because if you let that happen, then you really have nothing at that point. And so, yeah, just stick with it, because a lot of good stuff can happen. And real estate is actually pretty forgiving. Even if you do something wrong, which we all do, uh, you know, you're going to be able to recover.
Yeah, and try not to have the shiny object syndrome, right? Just
Yeah,
stick to
that's
stick to
probably the
it.
toughest one for me. Is that there's a lot of shiny objects out there,
Me
so
too.
that's a tough one to stay focused for sure.
Yeah, cool. Okay, what about a influencer that you like to follow that gives good advice?
I know this has been said on your podcast before, but I mean, I love everything that Beardy Brandon puts out. So go follow him on Instagram
Yeah.
at Beardy Brandon. He always has good stuff. He's a very positive guy, and give him a follow.
Cool. Yeah, I love watching his stuff because he's so mellow and so calm, and like he just like knows what he wants. He's like, well, okay, let's do it. Like it's just different than a lot of influencers. It's like go, go, go. You gotta like bust ass and do this and that. And you don't gotta be that way. So it's for all kinds of different people, for
Yeah, for
sure.
sure. Yep.
Cool. Well, where can we find out more about you and your company and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so you can find out more about me on my YouTube channel. It's Dude Real Estate. Also on Instagram, Dude Real Estate. And I'm launching a video course here soon with a one-on-one coaching component, so specifically geared to those people who are looking to get their first deal. It's just super important to get that first deal, because it just gets you that momentum to get you all those other deals. So it's just a passion of mine to help people get over that first little hurdle. One thing I like to say is that 100% of people who don't get their first deal, they never get their second deal.
Right.
So, it's just a really important one to get.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree. Well, cool. Well, man, I really appreciate you being here. I'm excited to see where you go in the future. And yeah, thanks for being here and you have a good afternoon.
Right on. Thanks, man. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
Thanks.